बंद करो एक मिनट।
One, two, three, go. 1, 2, 3, go. Come on. On the count of 3.
Kartika, can we have you up as well? So just a quick photo.
Okay, thank you.
Any particular seating?
No. Just sit wherever you like. I think there's mics for all of you guys.
Yeah, okay.
For you? Yeah? No. So I'll guide you. I'm going to start the whole meeting. And with the orchestra reading, and then I'll...
Me reading, oh my God.
Can you?
Yes, thanks.
Let's just edit that out, whoever's filming.
At least there'll be trendy specs. Wow.
Okay, so just to kick things off, we'll have the author himself read out a passage in his own voice.
Outside the window, through which the comforting light of a new day gives Ferdinand the courage to face it, the village emerges from its own slumber. Unlike Ferdinand's fitful variety, this slumber is usually a deep, dreamless one. It awakes every morning, not unlike a fat, overweight giant coming out of an alcohol-induced coma. A thin ground fog dusts the earth, top lit by underpowered halogen street lamps, every third one lit, creating spooky spotlights of shifting shapes and shadows. Nothing seems to move at all. And then, through the changing light, as black gets its first tinge of blue, the sickly halogens go off. The village twitches then, the overweight giants, comatose neurons sparking to life. Ghostly shapes emerge from the giant's paws, and they shuffle with sleepy, sullen gaits to my little watering hole, Brazos Taverna it is called. Thank you, Tina. Sandwiched between Alfonso's photo shop and Oscar's laundry. The 5:30 a.m. patrons rarely make conversation, and eavesdropper would hear incoherent murmurs as I lay out a row of glasses filled with coconut fenny. Fenny, where would Goa be without it? Where would I be without it? They come in every day, the toddy tappers, in their threadbare coats, with their cocks and balls and scrawny butts, all sacked up in brightly printed lungis. their skinny thighs shivering against the feel of the cold sickle blade. They knock back two each, and then they go climb their trees. The ubiquitous Cocos nucifera, with its rustling palm fronds, supplying 40 million coconuts per year all over Goa, one per family per day. They are all Hindus. They are my brothers. Every morning I wonder which of them might never come back. 40 feet above the ground is no place to have a bad day at the office.
That was great. So let's just start off very easy and simple. Obviously, everyone loves the title of the book. Tell us a little bit about how that happened.
So back in the early days when Homie and I were batting ideas back and forth for what eventually became Finding Fanny, the idea of the story was almost entirely his. And he mentioned one thing. He mentioned Goa is just full of villages where pointless conversations just proliferate. And that was one phrase that just stuck with me right throughout. And I think it kind of conveys the mood of the entire book. It kind of hangs like a cloud over the entire book, right through every twist and turn and every nuance, every word uttered by these nut job characters. And that's it. It was just the most apt title I could think of. I could not think of anything else. And thanks for that, Holmes.
Homie, grab the mic. Just tell me about between the two of you. Obviously, this novel is set in Goa. It really brings Goa to life. It's beautiful to read, and it was beautiful to watch. How did Goa become the setting?
Hello. Hello. Okay, I might as well just, sorry, I have to digress.
Please.
Hello, check. Check. Oh, so I'm going to just digress. I sent the book to Nasir about a month ago, and he started reading it. He sent me a message saying, I haven't had so much fun reading a book for I don't know how many years, and why the fuck didn't you make this into the film? I have no answer. Question was?
Goa. Why Goa?
There's a red light on your mic.
Yeah.
Put it on.
Okay. Well, why Goa? Because I don't know. I was sitting in Goa when I wrote the story, and I found the people in Goa extremely interesting. It was about pointless conversation. Everyone I met would really discuss how hot it was when you were sweating. They would say how humid it is when it's raining, how full they were after they eaten. And I said, fuck, I said, wow, this is incredible how everyone just keeps talking about the most obvious things. And the story was always set in my head about a postman finding a letter that he had written, and the irony of that never got posted. So it was always there. I tried to actually, in between, make it into a Hindi film and try to set it up north, but somehow the way we had written it and the way we had collaborated writing it, everything got lost when I translated it. So just stuck to my guns and we put it in Goa.
So Nasir obviously was a dream casting. Tell me what made you think of him? How did you approach him? How did that come to be?
Well, as my friend Sami was just telling us, since I made Being Cyrus, I've always had a vision in my head of anchoring Nasir and just plummeting him into the sea and letting him drown. That was my first visual of this movie. But no, Nasir, I mean, was the obvious choice there. And I remember I narrated this to Nasir a long time ago. And he couldn't do it at that time for various reasons. And I decided if I can't get him, I'm not going to make the movie. So I didn't make the movie, and I ended up making another film in between, which Nasir loves. And and then when I got back to it, he was the obvious choice. Yeah.
Kirsty, let's go back to the book really quickly before we jump into anything else. Was the book a chance to almost write what you didn't like about the movie? Was there anything that you...
My God, controversial questions. No, the book is exactly the way I imagined this story to unfold. It was just a different way of telling it, that's all. He imagined it differently from a cinematic point of view, and I just felt that whatever worked for cinema, there could be so much more done in a book form. So that was it. There was no other motive behind it. It was just my retelling of that same story that we had collaborated on. That's it.
So of course, the big difference in the book and the film is your character. And
Don't spoil it.
I'm not going to. But I'm curious to know what you think, Naseer. You've read the book, you've been in the film, of course. What do you think? How did you actually approach this character? What do you love about him? What do you hate about him? And how difficult was he to play?
Yeah, I will, to answer that, I'd just like to read a little passage that Kelsey has quoted from Oscar Wilde before the book begins. I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left. Yeah, I empathize completely with this statement. But, it's, apart from the compliments I received for my performance, I also got some brickbats. Foremost among them was one person who told me that I played him like a retard. I think a guy who walks into a funeral and mistakes a young girl who he knew 40 years ago to be the same person he was in love with cannot be anything but a retard, you know. So I just loved the complete innocence stroke foolishness of this character. I empathize with it a great deal. I often felt very foolish when I was a child. It has sort of stayed with me.
So when I read the book, I sort of had this feeling like the film was almost a love story, whereas the book felt more like a coming-of-age story. It's almost like Ferdy sort of came into himself and became more of a hero in one version as opposed to the other. So I'm just curious as to how did you see him? What decision did you make when you decided to change the ending, Homie? Did you decide other endings? Did you explore other ways of actually going with it without actually revealing anything?
No, I didn't change the ending. He changed the ending. It was originally written with my ending, and I must admit that I way prefer Kelsey's ending. And since I'm admitting things here, I might as well admit that the book is far superior to the film. But no, so the ending was a surprise for me when I read the book as well. Because how we worked was, I started writing the screenplay. I told him the story that I wanted to make into the film. I started writing the screenplay, and I would ask Kelsey to write it in a very novelistic way, because I think Kelsey writes brilliantly. And the imagery that his words evoke really helps a filmmaker when you're trying to, I can't exactly show the coconut pickers with their balls and scrawny asses sticking out and with glorious sensors. But the point is that I really felt that what he would write would inspire me in different ways to how I would finally construct the scene. So he kept writing these massive pages and pages for each scene. And then I just pick and dissect and take stuff and put it into the screenplay. So finally, by the end of it, once we had the screenplay ready, he had a huge manuscript ready, and he said, hey man, do you mind if I publish this as a book? So I said, sure, but let the film release first, and then you can make it into a book. That's why we flipped the whole thing around, and that's how it came about.
But you guys have collaborated before as well on Being Cyrus. So clearly you're, aside from being very young, dynamic, Parsis, good-looking Parsis.
Well, for Parsis, we are very young. For Parsis, we are definitely young.
The Parsi bit's right, at least. Tell me, what is it about the two of you that works as a dynamic, as collaborators creatively?
I think for me, I love, like I said, his style of writing. It helps me create different things. And also, I find his humor just fantastic. It's completely irreverent. very sort of self-deprecative, and I love that kind of humor. And yeah, I think that's how it works. And also, we don't do the same thing when we are collaborating together. You know, he'll write the dialogues, I'll construct the scene, then I'll read the way he's written certain passages which I can't possibly put into a film. I mean, I can't show what's in a person's head, which Kersey can elaborate on. As if you've read the book, you'll realize he really can. And but it sort of just clicks when it all comes together. It clicks, at least for us. I don't know about the public, but it clicks for us.
Kersey, say something nice about Homie.
Yeah, really, man. I mean, I made the book better than the movie.
So the reason I'm sitting here is because of Homie. Being Size was a short story which I had written for Gentleman magazine, and they rejected it unequivocally for bad language. And it just languished on my computer for like 2 years, and then Homie always had a bug up his ass about making a movie back then. And I said, hey, I've got a short story, you want to read it? And he read it, and I have to say this man's got cojones, a complete newcomer in this industry. He just went ahead, got the finest talent on board to make Being Cyrus. And then one thing led to another, so that's it. I'm actually here because of him.
Wonderful. Great. Twinkle, I want to come to you next. Do you want to maybe start off by doing a little bit of a reading?
First, I'd like to say that I got this copy. I didn't open it. I got it. I bought it because Kersey was too cheap to actually send me a copy. And when I got it and I read it, I messaged him. I said, this is terrible. It's terrible that after reading this, I want to rip the first 8 chapters of my next book and throw it in the bin. And he said, oh, yeah, wow, yeah. So I said, I just finished reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and I didn't feel like that. And, you know, your book is so amazing. I felt like that. He's like, what would you expect from a book in the 40s, Civil War? So civil rights. So he accepted my compliments with an absolute lack of humility. And, I actually thought this was his 9th book, but Homie told me that this is his first.
9th book?
I thought, because, you know, I thought maybe you're used to people saying, oh, wow, you write so well, you write so well. So having said that, the other thing is it's a wonderful, wonderful book. He's truly gifted. Please go and get your own copy because clearly he's not going to hand out any. Also, you'd have to scrounge around a bit because Kersey claims that Crosswords hides his books behind old Reader's Digest. And nowhere near...
In the children's coloring section.
Yes. And nowhere near the best-selling Chetan Bhagat's. But Kersey, I don't know if you really want to be stuck hip to hip or bum cheek to hip with Chetan, but that's really up to you. So on that note, let me read from Book 3, Chapter 16, Rosie. She watches his sweaty, receding back. Pins run up her legs and pass batons to needles who run down. She finally takes a deep breath, purely an involuntary need to get oxygen to the brain. The air feels hot, and her lungs feel like they are doused in paraffin. Vision swimming and jaws clamped tight, she places her hands on her knees and jerks herself upright, throwing one arm out against the stolid banyan for support. Her blanket falls off her shoulders and pools at her feet. She sees nature, ogling her stark, naked body. The trees, the clouds, the wheeling birds, the unseen insects in the grass, everything pinching its lips in disapproval. Humiliation is the true death. Life flashes before your eyes until there is no life left, and at the end of it, you're still alive, burning in shame's acid juices. Her mind roams the past looking for comfort. All that comes is a patchwork of hazy events, places, and people, and not one of them offers her a landing spot or a little hole she can snuggle into and forget the present. And worst of all, the single event in her life that she had sat upon, smothered all these years, as effectively as she might smother a squirming mouse under her enormous bottom, the death of Gabriel Albert Fernandez, her son. It rises. Her mother's defense mechanism tricking memory cells into blurring the ghastly picture of that final dreadful moment. Taming memory's wild dog tendencies to bite and claw at her dreams all these years, it crumbles. The images rush back, etched out and clearer than they have ever been, of her getting there first, kneeling next to his body, rigid and ridiculous in that 800-rupee wedding suit, and peering into his mouth and seeing that little replica of himself that he had drunkenly tried to eat and which ate him instead, and reaching in and pulling it out, but it's too late. The gates have been shut forever.
Wonderful. So, people say that funny books can't be literary, and you're a very funny writer yourself, Twinkle. So tell me, when you were reading this book, what were you thinking as you were reading it? What sort of book did it feel like for you?
Kersh's book is
Naseer, I'm going to ask you to do another reading in a couple of minutes, but before that, I just wanted to ask, today, if you had to give Ferdy some advice, what advice would you give him?
It glides all the way in and stops. Even as his heart does handsprings, he realizes it is only an envelope. But at this hour, he chews his lower lip, his eyelids feel heavy and his spine yearns for the embrace of the mattress, but now fear has pressed the pause button on his stupor. His brain goes through the usual computations of whether or not this can be life-threatening, as it does with all events in his life. But even at his paranoid worst, he cannot see anything sinister about an envelope. But at this hour, emboldened by the candle flame, he staggers a zigzag path to the front door, fumbles with the tumblers and yanks it open. He pokes his head out into the black night of Bokulim. Nothing moves. Some streetlights burn with feeble glows, others stutter, crickets confer busily, rodents squeak and cower as a hunter owl shrieks out a warning. But there is nothing out there that could have pushed that envelope under the door. Except for the sound. He pulls his head back in, shuts the door and waits. He counts to 10, eyes gleaming with excitement, swaying under the unsteady